Right now, as you're reading this, the world has already decided what you're worth, not based on your skills, not based on your intelligence, and definitely not based on how hard you work. The decision happened in seconds, maybe even before you opened your mouth. It happened in the way you carried yourself, the speed at which you moved, the silence you couldn't handle, and the desperate need you had to explain yourself. This is the brutal truth most people spend their entire lives running from. The world doesn't price you based on what you deserve. It prices you based on what you project. And if you've been struggling financially, if opportunities seem to slip through your fingers, if respect feels like something other people get but you don't, the problem isn't the world. The problem is the signal you're broadcasting every single day without even knowing it. Most men walk through life like they're sitting on a clearance rack, unconsciously advertising that they're available, that they're easy to get, that they'll accept whatever scraps come their way. They lower their standards before anyone asks them to. They explain decisions nobody questioned. They justify prices nobody challenged. They do all of this under one toxic belief that if they're just good enough, just fair enough, just patient enough, someone will eventually notice their worth and reward them for it. That belief, that one single delusion, has financially destroyed more capable men than laziness ever could. Because here's what nobody wants to tell you. Human beings don't reward merit. They never have. They reward perceived power. And power in every single era throughout history begins in the imagination of others. If this makes you uncomfortable, good, because comfort is only a luxury for those who can already afford it. For everyone else, comfort is the most expensive trap they'll ever fall into. Let me give you the first rule that wealthy people understand but never say out loud. No one pays for what feels abundant. Not your attention, not your labor, not your presence, and certainly not you as a person. The moment you make yourself cheap, the market doesn't feel sorry for you. It doesn't give you credit for being humble or accessible. It adjusts your price downward immediately, just like a store marks down an item that won't sell. Once you're labeled as easy to obtain, no one cares how well made you are. They've already moved on to something rarer, something that resists them just enough to feel valuable. Think about John D. Rockefeller when he was consolidating oil refineries and building his empire. He did something that confused everyone around him. He refused meetings. He delayed responses. He let silence stretch out until it became uncomfortable. His competitors thought he was being arrogant, but they completely missed the point. Rockefeller understood leverage. Every unanswered letter made him seem more important. Every delayed response raised the psychological price of access to him. By the time he finally sat down to negotiate, he wasn't just negotiating oil contracts anymore. He was negotiating from a position of inevitability. People had already convinced themselves he was too important to lose. Machiavelli warned about this centuries ago. He told princes to never be too available, too familiar, too generous with their presence, not because generosity itself is bad, but because excess destroys authority. When access to you has no friction, when people can reach you anytime they want, respect evaporates. This applies to money the exact same way it applies to kingdoms and power. Being expensive isn't about having money in your bank account. It's about controlling desire in others. True luxury is never bought aggressively or advertised loudly. It's interpreted quietly. An Hermes bag doesn't shout its value. A private members club doesn't chase new applicants. A powerful man doesn't try to convince anyone of anything. He simply allows others to reach their own conclusions, and those conclusions almost always inflate his value. This is where most people completely fail. They think value is proven through exposure, through showing everything they have, through transparency and constant hustle theater. But neuroscience tells us something much colder. The human brain stops releasing dopamine when a reward becomes predictable. When something is always available, it becomes invisible to us. We don't desire what we fully understand. We desire what resists us slightly, what stays just out of reach. You've already lived this truth even if you haven't named it yet. The person who responds to your messages instantly becomes background noise in your mind. The one who takes a little longer, who seems slightly out of reach, becomes memorable. The product that floods the market collapses in price overnight. The one that limits supply becomes a status symbol. This isn't romance or poetry. This is biology. This is how human perception actually works. In modern terms, here's the rule. Price is a psychological construct, not an economic one. Jeff Bezos understood this from the very beginning. Amazon lost money for years, but Bezos never behaved like a desperate man begging for validation. He spoke slowly, he played the long game, he refused short-term approval. That posture alone, that calm refusal to panic, attracted billions in capital before Amazon ever turned a real profit. Investors weren't buying earnings reports. They were buying conviction wrapped in restraint. They were buying the feeling that this man knew something they didn't. Machiavelli would have smiled at that. He wrote that men judge more with their eyes than with their hands, because everyone can see appearances, but very few can feel the underlying reality. If you look cheap, you will be treated cheap. No amount of negotiation can fix that after the fact. In today's economy of constant noise, oversharing, and 24/7 availability, the person who gives themselves away entirely loses all leverage. The person who withholds strategically, who pauses before speaking, who withdraws at the right moments accumulates power. Not because they're better than everyone else, but because they're rarer. Scarcity is the oldest currency on Earth. Think about luxury stores for a moment. There are no loud greetings when you walk in, no discounts being shouted. Sometimes the salesperson barely even looks at you. That cold stillness isn't rudeness, it's strategy. It triggers one specific thought in your mind. Maybe this place isn't for everyone. And the exact moment you feel that thought, you want in. You want to prove you belong. Expensive stops being a number at that point. It becomes an emotion, a feeling you're chasing. People work exactly the same way. If you explain too much, you devalue yourself. If you justify your price, you lower it. If you're afraid of losing the opportunity, you've already lost it. Machiavelli understood that neediness is submission, and submission is always underpaid. You might be broke right now. That's completely irrelevant to this conversation. What matters is the signal you're emitting into the world. You can be financially poor and still project scarcity. You can have no institutional power and still create psychological weight in a room. Silence does that. Distance does that. Control does that. Being expensive begins as an internal discipline long before it shows up in your bank account. It's the decision to stop chasing, to stop begging to be chosen, to stop negotiating from a place of fear. Because money, respect, and opportunity all obey the same invisible law. They move toward certainty, not toward need. And here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to hear. The world will not correct your self-perception. It will exploit it. If you act common, you will be consumed. If you act rare, you will be studied. That's not arrogance, that's survival. Now, let me ask you something. Where have you been too available, too fast, too eager to prove yourself? If you're honest with yourself, you already know the answer. The second rule builds directly on this foundation. The more you control your availability, the higher your perceived worth becomes. Machiavelli never advised rulers to be cruel without reason. He advised them to be measured, to give favors sparingly, to avoid constant exposure. Because when people can reach you anytime, they stop respecting you. Familiarity doesn't breed affection like we were taught. It breeds contempt, and contempt is always underpaid. Observe the truly powerful people, not the loud ones pretending to be powerful. They rarely explain what they're doing. They don't narrate their process. They don't clarify their intentions for everyone watching. They allow ambiguity to work on their behalf. Why? Because the human mind fears what it cannot fully decode, and fear, when mixed with curiosity, creates value. This isn't theory, this is observable pattern. Look at Warren Buffett. For decades, he spoke less than everyone else in the room. When markets panicked, he stayed silent. When others rushed to explain their strategies, he waited. And when he finally acted, capital followed him like gravity. Investors weren't paying for information, they were paying for restraint, for patience, for the feeling that Buffett only moved when it truly mattered. Machiavelli understood this centuries before Buffett was born. He warned that a prince who explains himself too much weakens his own authority. Explanation invites judgment. Judgment invites negotiation. Negotiation collapses power. The wealthy know this instinctively, which is why they don't justify prices, don't defend decisions, don't chase understanding. This is the second rule in action. Distance is branding. Think of any high-status environment, exclusive clubs, private banks, elite universities. They don't beg, they don't persuade, they wait. The rejection itself becomes the filter, and that filter creates prestige. In contrast, watch what weak people do. They overshare. They flood the market with themselves. They talk too much, explain too fast, respond instantly to every message, and then they wonder why they're overlooked, underpaid, or completely ignored. They mistake visibility for value. But Machiavelli would tell you clearly, visibility without control is just exposure, and exposure without strategy is vulnerability. Distance is not disappearing completely, it's measured presence. The powerful don't vanish into thin air, they simply don't surrender themselves freely. They choose when to appear, they choose when to speak, they choose when to withdraw. That choice alone signals dominance. Look at modern tech elites. Elon Musk tweets constantly, yet reveals almost nothing meaningful about his actual inner strategy. He controls narrative through timing, not through volume. Meanwhile, executives who over-explain their vision get dissected, doubted, and discounted. Mystery protects leverage. The same principle applies to you. When you're always available, you become infrastructure. Useful, sure, but completely replaceable. When you restrict access, you become a resource, scarce, observed, respected. This is where many people completely misunderstand humility. They believe humility means being accessible, agreeable, open, and responsive to everyone. But that version of humility is economic suicide. Machiavelli knew this. He warned that rulers who sought love before fear lost both. In modern terms, those who seek approval before value lose all leverage. Being expensive is not arrogance. Arrogance screams insecurity. Being expensive is quiet confidence. It's knowing when silence speaks louder than any speech. It's understanding that not every message deserves a reply, not every invitation deserves acceptance, and not every opportunity deserves your presence. This is why luxury environments feel emotionally cold when you first enter them. That chill is intentional. It triggers the ancient part of your brain that asks, "Do I belong here?" And once that question arises in your mind, desire ignites. The exact same psychology applies to people. If you answer immediately, you reduce tension. If you delay, you create gravity. If you explain everything, you flatten perception. If you withhold strategically, you elevate it. Machiavelli described this as the administration of favor. Too much generosity weakens authority. Too much accessibility dissolves respect. The wealthy understand this in their bones. They don't give everything at once, they give fragments, teasers, signals that suggest there's more beneath the surface. Consider how private equity firms operate. They don't pitch loudly to everyone, they select quietly. They don't pursue capital desperately, they let capital compete for access to them. That inversion alone multiplies valuation. And here's the paradox most people cannot accept. The less you visibly need money, the more money moves toward you. Detachment is not indifference, it's leverage. Money senses fear the same way animals sense weakness. This is why negotiating from lack is fatal. When you accept less out of fear, you confirm your own low price. When you wait, you force the market to adjust to you. Waiting is not passivity, it's strategy. Machiavelli praised those who mastered uncomfortable silence. Silence destabilizes others. They rush to fill it. They overoffer. They reveal information they shouldn't. The one who remains calm gains information and control without lifting a finger. This rule applies everywhere: business, relationships, reputation. The one who speaks less but with intention becomes expensive. The one who explains constantly becomes noise. Now, the third rule emerges from this pattern. Your boundaries are your price tag. Machiavelli understood this with brutal clarity. He warned that the ruler who tries to hold on to everything becomes a slave to everything. Power is not built by accumulation, it's built by selection. The ability to renounce, to refuse, to walk away is not weakness, it's the highest signal of control. Most people think saying yes makes them valuable. In reality, it just makes them available, and availability is always discounted. Every time you accept what doesn't serve you out of fear of loss, you teach the market exactly how cheaply you can be bought. Look at Steve Jobs when he returned to Apple. The company was drowning in product lines, partnerships, and compromises. Jobs didn't add more, he cut ruthlessly. He eliminated 70% of Apple's offerings. That act of renunciation saved the company and turned it into the most valuable brand on earth. Why? Because focus creates scarcity. Scarcity creates desire. Desire creates value. Machiavelli would have recognized this immediately. He wrote that a prince who distributes favors indiscriminately cheapens himself. When everything is allowed, nothing is respected. When everything is accepted, nothing is valued. This applies to your time, your words, your energy, your emotional availability. If anyone can access you, interrupt you, drain you, or demand explanations from you, then your price is low. It doesn't matter how talented you are. People don't respect generosity without limits. They exploit it. They may praise you publicly, but they discount you privately. This is why the most available person in the room is rarely the most valued. The third rule is not about becoming cold, it's about becoming selective. The wealthy understand that limits are not walls, they're notices. Notices that say silently, "I am not for everyone." That phrase is never spoken aloud, but it's deeply felt. And what is felt is what gets paid for. Look at high-level consultants. The best ones charge more not because they do more work, but because they refuse most clients. Their no is expensive. Their yes is rare. And because of that, every minute of their time carries enormous weight. Machiavelli taught that respect is born from distance, not affection. This is uncomfortable for modern minds raised on approval-seeking behavior, but the pattern repeats everywhere. The employee who never says no is overworked and underpaid. The friend who is always available is taken for granted. The partner who gives unconditionally is eventually devalued. Renunciation creates fear of loss, and fear of loss is the engine of value. This is why the rich don't rush. They tolerate silence. They endure rejection without reacting emotionally. They don't negotiate from hunger. Hunger is the cheapest signal in any market. There's a reason elite negotiators are trained to sit in silence. Silence forces the other side to reveal urgency. Urgency collapses leverage. The one who can endure discomfort controls the exchange. Boundaries cost something. They cost immediate approval. They cost invitations. They cost access. But what they buy is long-term valuation. Think of private banks. They don't chase clients. They reject most applicants. And that rejection itself becomes the signal of exclusivity. People don't desire what welcomes everyone. The same principle applies to your personal brand. If you respond to everything, you dilute yourself. If you explain every decision, you invite judgment. If you justify every boundary, you weaken it. And now the final rule, the one Machiavelli considered the foundation of all power. Whoever controls themselves controls the market around them. Power doesn't begin with money. Money is just a consequence. Power begins with posture, with rhythm, with the ability to remain unmoved when others rush, beg, explain, or panic. Machiavelli never admired men who accumulated endlessly. He admired men who selected deliberately, who could renounce without trembling. Because the price of a man is not defined by what he owns, but by what he can lose without losing himself. Look at history's enduring elites.
Ancient kings didn't walk fast, they didn't respond immediately, they didn't justify decisions. Slowness was authority, indifference was dominion. In a world where everyone reacted emotionally, the one who remained composed became sovereign. That hasn't changed, only the setting has. Today, the person who answers instantly looks desperate. The one who pauses looks important. The one who floods the room with words looks unsure. The one who speaks sparingly is actually listened to. Control of impulse has become rare, and rarity by definition is extensive. This is where most people fail completely. They believe value is created through visible effort. More work, more explanation, more demonstration. But excess demonstration is just disguised insecurity. The wealthy understand this instinctively. They don't convince, they allow perception to crystallize naturally. Consider Bernard Arnault. He rarely gives interviews. He doesn't explain LVMH's dominance. He doesn't justify luxury pricing. Silence does the work. When questioned, he smiles and withdraws. That withdrawal alone reinforces the brand's untouchability. Luxury is not defended, it's assumed. Machiavelli would say the same. The prince who defends himself appears weak. The one who remains silent forces others to interpret him upward, because the human mind fills gaps with projection, and projection almost always inflates value. This is the alchemy of perception. People don't buy realities, they buy symbols. They don't respond to truth, they respond to signals, and signals are emitted through behavior, not words. This is why control is the most valuable currency in the world. Control of time, control of emotion, control of reaction. Control converts ordinary men into figures of authority. No one invests in instability. No one pays a premium for chaos. Even if your inner world is in ruins, you must project solidity, not to deceive, but to protect. Machiavelli never spoke of appearances as lies. He spoke of them as armor. The mask is not fraud. It's survival in a world that exploits exposed weakness. If people believe you're expensive, they will treat you with care. If they believe you're cheap, they will use you without guilt. This is not morality. This is mechanics. That's why being expensive is not pride, it's positioning. Respect is not asked for. It's imposed quietly by the calm of someone who doesn't rush to be understood. The rich don't chase buyers, they let buyers chase access. The moment you stop trying to sell yourself, your price begins to rise. The market smells fear instantly. Urgency devalues everything it touches. Think of negotiations. The one who can walk away controls the table. The one who cannot is already defeated. This is why elite dealmakers train themselves to internalize one single thought: I can leave. Even when it's not fully true yet, that belief alters posture, tone, pace. The other side feels it immediately. Being expensive means learning when to withdraw at the peak of interest, knowing when to disappear before becoming predictable. Predictability kills mystery. Mystery sustains gravity. You don't need money to begin this transformation. You need discipline. You need restraint. You need the courage to tolerate silence without seeking validation. Every second you endure without seeking validation is a coin deposited into your future value. Being expensive, even when you're not, is not a costume, it's a transition. First you believe it, then you project it, then the world confirms it. Gold shone before it became currency. What made it valuable was not effort, but belief in its rarity. Do the same with yourself.